Good afternoon and welcome to this month's Lunch and Learn. It's great to see so many of you in the attendee list. Do introduce yourself, use the chat function. I can see some of you have already done that, but introduce yourself. It'd be great to know where you're listening from today, maybe what your role is or type of stakeholders or service users or learners you work with in your day-to-day life, in your professional career. So I'm David Anthony and I look after the research, learning and new business development side at Beyond Autism. And if you've not heard of Beyond Autism, we're a not-for-profit organisation which runs educational services for autistic learners. So we work with people as young as 15 months right through to 25 years. And today's session is very close to our hearts at Beyond Autism, and it's around resilience and this idea of what resilience is, but also looking at what strategies we might be able to develop and use, whether it's for the service users we serve, their families, or even colleagues or ourselves. So Beyond Autism very much has a vision around autistic children and young adults accessing an education that empowers a life full of choice, independence, and opportunity. And to do that, it needs a whole network of people. And some of the most important stakeholders in that network, if not the most important, are the parents. And when we look at some of the strategic objectives and outcomes which Beyond Autism has, you'll see that one of them is very much focused on increased resilience and confidence in families. Because we know when families feel resilience, have resilience, and informed and confident in the different decisions and options they have, the outcomes for the children will be better. Some of the other objectives we have there around school placement breakdown, increased employability, developing a young person's ideal week. So what's important to that young person and what do we need to have in place for them to live that life that they choose. And also the last one on there, communities are supported to include autistic people. But today we're going to focus on resilience. And I'm not going to say I've got all the answers around resilience, and I just wanted to share with you some of the findings that Beyond Autism has been looking into in the recent years and months. So today we'll look at adversity and the impact of adversity on people's ability to show resilience. We'll look at traditional forms and models of resilience, traditional thinking of resilience, but also then explore something called the Bishop model of resilience. And Dr. Alison Bishop, originally working at Suffolk University, now at the University of East London, has been really supportive in forming this presentation for you today. And then we'll look at what tools and resources might be available when we think about resilience. And we're going to explore something called the resilience signature, which I'm particularly excited about. I think it's really good. And hopefully you'll think the same too. So starting right at the basics about what is resilience. So it's this idea of a concept of recovering easily and quickly from misfortune or illness. But it's widely recognized as this quite complex concept. And actually, it's quite an abstract idea when we think about resilience. It's not something we can necessarily touch, but I think it's something we can all recognize and see in other people, and possibly ourselves as well, when we know we're being resilient or need to be, or someone else is. But rather than seeing as resilience as something that someone has or doesn't have, it's rather a process or adaptation that people take part in. So it's not someone's individual trait, and everyone has a level of resilience or doesn't. So when we think about resilience, it's important not to associate people like this person doesn't have any resilience, this person has lots of resilience, because there's lots of stigma associated with people who aren't resilient. And when we think about how different generations are described, I'm just a millennial, and you know how people describe different generations and their resilience and what people associate with them. But it's really, really important to see it as this process. And competence in resilience, or being competent and being resilient, changes over time as we experience things. And it's very much contextual to that individual, and very much their experience and very individual to them rather than something that's shared. So Beyond Autism, we're in the middle of our Beyond 25 stakeholder consultation, and resilience plays a really key important factor of that. So why I'm talking to you today, it would be great if you could contribute to the chat, like your response to this question. So we are working on our next 5-year strategy, and what's really, really important is family resilience. And it's a really key theme to what we're doing. And what we'd like to do is hear your thoughts on what support do you think families need to help them feel confident, informed, and resilient in providing the best possible environment for autistic children or learners. So if you could have a think about that question, why I talk to you, drop your ideas in the chat box. Like I say, we're capturing as many views as possible. And at the end, there's a full link to the consultation if you would like to take part. So you can't talk about resilience without adversity, and researchers and people who work in this field or talk about resilience, you can't not talk about adversity. They're paired together. And the dictionary definition of that is a difficult or unpleasant situation. And everyone will face some sort of adversity in their life, and their response will heavily depend on their individual circumstances, such as their lived experiences, their demographics, their access to resources, and environmental factors. And if we think about the hierarchy of needs here, this really comes into full effect. But adversity, what I feel is a difficult situation compared to maybe a colleague, will be very personal to me, and I will experience that very different to the other person. And it will be very much based on what support I have, what experiences I've had with that situation in the past, depending on how well I manage and cope. We recently did a quality of life piece of research with some of our families at Beyond Autism, and support for carers came out as one of the lower scoring areas. Whereas the higher scoring areas were self-worth, satisfaction around caring for a young person or their child. But the real issues and the real adversity that they felt was around money matters and support. And those experiences, how much your experience of that will depend on how much resilience you have. So traditional ways of thinking about resilience is very linear. So something happens in a person's life, and it could be anything, couldn't it? I mean, we all face challenges every single day, and they're almost on a spectrum of difficulty and intensity, duration. It might be the death of a family pet or a family member, right through to financial difficulties, losing your job, or in the context of Beyond Autism, a young person facing difficulties with their day-to-day life. And having accidents or incidents which cause challenges to the family members being able to care for them. So that issue or challenge happens. And then the second stage is adaptation, that we respond. So we have protective factors involved, individual, the community, the family, and we respond by being emotional. We'll have our own behavioral responses. We might use particularly strategies we've learned maybe through CBT or other intervention. And then we have the positive outcome from that challenge, which is our resistance, our bounce back, our recovery, whether it's slow or fast. And that post-traumatic growth, what we adapt and learn after an incident. And the more times we experience a similar challenge, often the quicker the bounce back will be, or our burnout or our resilience is being exhausted or challenged, and we become slower at bouncing back because we're being ground down and challenged more. But this is a traditional view of resilience in practice. Something happens, we respond, and then there's a post recovery, a period of time where we recover from the event. What I'd like to suggest, and this is fully informed by Dr. Alison Bishop's work on adversity and resilience, this idea that actually resilience is part of a cycle. And I almost like to think of it as a spring, and it's constantly going round. So we have at the top there the actual incident or challenge, and then we have our management, what we do in the event, in that moment, to manage the risk to ourselves or others or to the young person we're working with. There's then that aftermath before we start to recover. And then we have, again, the adaptation, the things we've learnt from that actual traumatic event. But what we do is we take that learning with us into the next challenge. We have this whole cycle of learning which has taken place to inform ourselves on how to best recover the next time we're faced with a challenge. And there's many factors which impact our resilience, and one of them being our environment. And I touched on it earlier, and a big key part of that is our support network, whether we're alone, our cultural circumstances, and how much we are able to access services and engage in it. So around that cycle, all the time, we're involving the environment, we're connecting with the environment. But you'll see something here that I've put in, something called the resilience signature, which is something I want to talk to you about for the rest of this presentation. The resilience signature is very much about a tool which we can use during this cycle of challenge and recovery to really look after ourselves and build resilience for the next time we're faced with a challenging situation. So the resilience signature is very personal to an individual, and it's based around these 7 areas. And it's essentially, how do I recover from adversity? How do I recover from challenges and incidents in my life which are extremely taxing and challenging on me personally, on my mental health, on my well-being? What do I need in my life, and how do I respond to those things to recover? And what's been broken down are these 7 different areas, and I'll give you some examples of each of these. So when we think about physical, I'm definitely not this person, but when faced with challenges or being better prepared for things coming along, physical activity, and I know many parents of children who go for a run, possibly before their children wake up to go to school, or they take 20 minutes after work to make sure they engage in physical exercise. But when a challenge comes along, physical exercise is their go-to decompression. How do they recover, and how do they progress through this challenging situation? Emotional, it's absolutely okay to be emotional. It's a human reaction. I think often it's frowned upon to be emotional or to be upset about things, and it's not appropriate, but it 100% is. If something challenging or upsetting happens, it's okay to be emotional. And I think if you're a professional working with families, it's giving that space and capacity and option for family to be emotional, to be upset. It is hard, it is challenging, and emotional responses are very normal. And actually, many of us need to go through that before we can recover and carry on and show that resilience. Spiritual, I know from my own family and members of my family, faith is really, really important. And actually a lot of resilience comes from their faith, and actually understanding why things might have happened and how things have developed. And actually there's more meaning behind it, and actually going to faith and religion to help work through difficulties is definitely how some people manage and work towards being more resilient. Social, this is definitely more me, ringing somebody up, jumping on the phone, expressing maybe that emotion, but also talking through what's happened and having that option, that outlet to share with somebody. And you can see how all of these things are very personal to the individual, because it is dependent on what resources that person has available to them. Cognitive, if that person's maybe had types of therapy in the past and learnt ways of thinking through what's happened, how to react, how to manage their thoughts. I think for me as well, that's definitely when I face a challenge, some time on my own with my own thoughts to think through what has happened is really, really important. And then material and practical are quite similar, but doing physical things or engaging with things, hobbies, or other activities to really work through what has happened. So what we have is these range of 7 different areas that can build up our resilient signature. And what we're encouraging people to do is to really get to know your own individual signature. So as a person, as a professional, but also as a professional helping families, and if you're a family, you could use this with your child as well. But really working out, like, what do I go to recover, and how do I build that into my day? And I know the first thing is, where do we find the time for these things? Like, my day's already full. I'm a carer. Time is not a carer or a parent. Time is not on my side. But actually, just building in just a few minutes of these things, which are important for your recovery, helps in the prevention as well. So the one on the left-hand side, you can see this person is very much, they have that emotional need, but they also have this idea that they need to think through their situation. So cognitive, we have social, so they're on the phone, they're sharing with their family or friends what's happened to them. And material and practical, they need to do something about it. This person wouldn't engage maybe in physical exercise, or wouldn't go to their faith for support. And then you can see on the other side, it's slightly different. This signature is very much about physical activity, practical, emotional and spiritual. But part of this process is recognizing in yourself what you need for recovery, and how and what you access, maybe as a parent or as a professional, to recover from the situations, and then embedding it into what your day looks like. So if you are a professional on this call, and our Lunch and Learns are tending to be aimed at professionals, I thought it was really, really important to think about how we support people with resilience. And the first one is this idea of compassion and empathy. So we won't have the same lived experience maybe as a parent of an autistic child or an autistic adult. So we don't know what that family's life is like, but we can listen, and empathy is about listening, and ultimately showing compassion. People are presented in circumstances outside of their control, and we have the opportunity, not to change their life, but at least change their day and give them that ear to listen to what's happening. And as a professional, you're likely to be in a strength of privilege. And often as professionals, we're the gatekeeper to resources or signposting. And it's our job to be informed on how we can help families get the best possible support. And if we go back to that quality of life survey I was talking about earlier, support for carers was one of the lowest scoring areas for our families we work with. So knowing what the support is out there is something we can do very practically to help families through their challenges. Try and understand, show empathy with a person's capacity to work through the adversity they're facing. So if you have faced something similar to somebody else, you will have dealt with it in a very certain way, but that's your experience. That's with your resources and your position. Another person might go through something exactly the same, but will have different resources available to them. And it's showing understanding that people react to things differently. Often you hear about, oh, it's only a small thing, or it's only this, but actually things don't happen in isolation. And people's challenges are often a collection of different things going off in a person's life, and sometimes it can only just take one more thing to tip people over into, feeling like they can't cope. So really showing that everyone deals with things differently, and has different capacities to work through things is really, really important. Respect how a person needs to deal with their challenge. So just because you might not use religion or faith to deal with a problem in your life, we respect how other people might choose to. So if they use religion as their source of comfort, then showing respect, and it's an opportunity to learn as well, actually, from that person, how they deal with their adversity. Another person might want to go for a run, and you might not be able to relate to that. But the important thing is we show respect for other people's signatures and how they want to cope with the challenges being presented to them. And the worst thing you can say to someone is, keep calm and carry on. It's not about just keep going all the time. And I think there's such pressure on parents, but also professionals, to keep going day after day. But actually, you need to engage in those things which aid recovery, or you will burn out and your health and well-being will suffer. So it's definitely not about carry on and keep calm. It is very much about recovery and creating spaces to learn from what is happening. So that is the last slide today on resilience and this idea of developing signatures. And there are other tools out there. So there's tools around anxiety. So things like the anxiety bucket, where your bucket is full of absolute anxiety. You can do different things to lower the level of your bucket and create capacity. And the whole theme around this presentation today, I know it's relatively short, but it's about more compassionate schools and compassionate professionals, and understanding that our parents we work with are almost, they have to run this network of medical appointments, of school visits, of reports, meetings after meetings, the HCP, the local authority, and that requires a huge capacity for any parent. But when we add the layer of disability or additional needs, that can be incredibly challenging. And as professionals, the best thing we can do is offer our understanding, our empathy, and, like I say, compassion. Our next Lunch and Learn is actually on masking, which is a really, really important subject in the field of autism. I really, really recommend that you go and visit that presentation on the 13th. Again, it's free. It'll be 20 minutes, half an hour of your time just before Christmas, before we set off into the new year. There's also a QR code there, and I'd really love to hear your thoughts on what resources need to be out there for autistic young people, learners. If you've got time, it's really quick, a few questions for you to answer. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And my email address was up on screen, but also you can find it on the website. And I'd love to continue the conversation about resilience, because it is a huge importance to the success of our learners and young people, and something that we're continuing to research at Beyond Autism. So absolutely. But the slides will be available, and this presentation we put online as well, so you can always come back and revisit it. So I can see there's some questions about having a picture of the resilience map. Absolutely. And a big thanks to Dr. Alison Bishop from the University of East London for working with us on this today. But I think we might have a few questions, so I'm just going to have a look because we've got a few minutes left. The first thing was, what do you say to schools when your child is struggling to get to school as support is not in place and the staff keep saying they have to be more resilient? Schools don't seem to understand that their way of resilience is actually causing trauma. Absolutely. And I think it's, even taking maybe this presentation today to the school, and like I say, you'll get a copy of it, but, it's really challenging them on what do they define as being resilient, like what do they mean by being more resilient, and actually what is their plan to support them being more resilient as the educators. What can they do to work on that resilience? And what I would say, it was very small pieces of progress at a time, or small challenges at a time, so that person or young person can recover each time, and feel success, because actually resilience is very much linked to success as well. But I'm happy to pick up that conversation regarding that question afterwards, if you feel like emailing me, and we can pick it up at a later date. Sorry, I might have missed it, but how do you access this tool, please? The slides will be provided, and like I say, if you want to get in touch with me, I can talk through and point you in the direction of the actual researcher involved. And do we have an actual resilience map? Yeah, we have the slides here, so I'll share those with you. I can't see any more questions. I don't know if I've missed any. I don't think so. What I'd like to do is thank you for your time today. Do fill in a consultation. Do get in touch about resilience. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts. I'll read all of the chat after the presentation is finished today as well. So thank you for your time, and do check out the masking presentation on the 13th of December. Thank you very much, and take care.